they just don't have guys that Scott Service really trusts beyond Ryan Stanek and Andres Munoz. And both of those guys have had their moments too where they've been either injured or not productive.
Ryan, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Nice, man. Well, hey, listen, I feel like every time you're jumping on the show, the one thing that sticks out is Julio's going through a little bit of a rough stretch. I mean, you go back to the road trip, Miami, Tampa, Cleveland. He was struggling, man. No extra base hits. What are you seeing from Julio in this, in that stretch? And just, I mean, first half overall, but right now, what are you seeing from Julio Rodriguez?
Yeah, it was. I think it's some of the similar stuff we saw earlier in the year. Kind of the lack of balance in the batter's box, falling all over, but really just how they were attacking him. Getting pounded in on his hands with, they're using sinkers now a lot too. These high, 95 mile per hour sinkers that are kind of running towards that back foot. And then, once they get him, bust him in hard, they just start kind of going away, 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 seeing if he'll chase. And, it's been a problem. And I think, part of it was he had some success. He was starting to get going, and he wants to keep doing it. And you get in swing mode, and it's hard to get out of it. And I think he's tried to swing his way out of this a little bit more. And what was he, 3 for 30, I think, on the road trip? Even like the big walk that he had the other day to help win the game. He draws a 9-pitch walk, and then Cal Raleigh hits the big 3-run homer after that. If you go back and look, only one of those pitches was a strike in all 9 pitches.
Yeah.
So once he got behind, he was kind of forced to chase the guy around outside the zone and foul some pitches off. He laid off the ones that were kind of no doubters out of the hand. And I don't know that there's an easy solution. It's, I think some of the mechanical issues have been cleaned up a little bit. I think it's a better looking swing than it was earlier, more athletic. Scott Service talked about him not getting his front foot down, not being on time on fastballs. And then obviously the approach. Maybe you eliminate just half the plate. If you know that you're going to get busted in a half on the inside, which is a tough pitch to hit anyways, with how hard these guys throw, maybe just eliminate it. Eliminate it and say, look, anything that looks middle, especially early in counts, anything that looks middle isn't going to stay middle because, teams have known for a while now that you don't throw it to him. If you're going to miss off the plate. Yeah. So if they're throwing him sinkers, they're going to start an inner half, and they're not going to stay there. They're going to miss to the inside, and the same with sliders away. So maybe eliminate half the plate, start there, and really just try and focus on that. Maybe, cheat it, get your front foot down early. What was that? Remember Jose Batista, how it changed his career? He did that huge leg kick, but he exaggerated and cheated. Justin Turner, big leg kick,
for sure.
Exaggerate it, get it down early, and then adjust from there. Because he's certainly a good enough athlete to do that, I would think.
Yeah, you know what's funny, man? Because you actually brought this up. I can't remember how many weeks it was ago but you brought up the balancing. I didn't even pay attention. Now I really started to watch, and you just watch that finish, man, like that swing, and then all of a sudden he's shuffling his feet all over the place. Honestly, I hadn't really paid attention. Do you think it's more of a mental thing for him, though? You mentioned the raw talent. He's got plenty of that. But do you feel like he's glancing up, you see in your peripheral vision up on the scoreboard the fact that the home run numbers are down, and you get in your head, and that's when it all starts to snowball when you're in the box? Or do you think this is purely a mechanical adjustment that could be made? If he sticks with it, he'll be fine? Or which direction you going there?
I think it's some of it's mental, it's emotional, it's all these things. The mechanical aspect I think has been cleaned up. If you notice, though, sometimes even on his takes, he's taking hard with his legs, which you want to do, but he's falling forward. It's like, I think it's began like if you're falling towards the plate, that makes you even more susceptible to that inside pitch. I just think, just finding that good balance and, slow with your legs and fast with your hands. He hasn't really found that yet. It's just, it's probably like my golf swing. It's it's a little off kilter. It's like I remember when you took BP that time when we were down in Arizona. It wasn't pretty, but you got 2 hits in the game. So
I did.
Yes.
Super late, by the way. I mean, I remember everyone's like, "Oh, you got 2 hits." I mean, did you see the hits? It was just straight off time.
Out of the catcher's glove as you pulled them right out.
It was like cricket. If anyone listening to this knows what cricket, all about cricket, but just straight laid on that thing and off it went, scurried its way through the infield. But yeah, man, Julio, I feel like everyone talks about the offense is so tied to him. When he's struggling, the offense struggles. But talking about the first half, we're kind of at that midway point. Is this, if going out of the off season, out of spring training, we get to this point in the season, is this what you anticipated, or are you surprised by anything with this team overall? I mean, you can start with offense, pitching, bullpen. Is there anything that surprises you about this first half so far?
Well, the record, I think, is the most surprising thing. That they're leading the division. They're leading the division without, I think, playing, top level baseball where all facets are at least, average to above average. I think that's the biggest thing, the record, their success, and then some of the struggles. I didn't anticipate Julio being this guy that has, 7 homers. I think Dylan Moore has more homers than him. I didn't anticipate Mitch Garver, Mitch Haniger, Jorge Polanco to be this well below their normal kind of production levels. I mean, and even J.P. Crawford, he's flirting with 200. And the strikeout percentage is very high. And I didn't expect this team to strike out as much. Everything we saw at spring training and how they constructed this roster, I knew they would strike out. They could sit there and preach that they didn't want to strike out as much. They were still going to strike out. Yeah. But the rate they're doing it now is just ridiculous. So that's my biggest thing. And then that they haven't really found a Steckenrider or a Seawald or a Topa out of those group of guys. And that's really hurt them. Because, the injury issues with the bullpen, they just don't have guys that Scott Service really trusts beyond Ryan Stanek and Andres Munoz. And both of those guys have had their moments, too, where they've been either injured or not productive.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah, there isn't that one guy that kind of bridges the gap. Like we've seen, you mentioned Topa. You had Gabe Spire last year. Obviously, he's on the IL. Yeah, Steckenrider, obviously Seawald. That's a great point. I mean, and the bullpen has been just razor thin, man. That's the one thing you kind of knew with Matt Brash and Santos hitting the IL. They picked up Stanek, but you're like, oh man, there could be some major issues. And that brings me to the next thing I want to ask you about: is the trade deadline? Are we going to be now focused on bullpen help? As boring as it sounds, everyone's talking about that big bat, right? Or going to get offense. And you and I know, we follow this team every single day, that the Mariners really, push towards that one player that they can control for the next couple of years. Is it now all of a sudden it's distracting because the bullpen's so thin that now it's like, oh, sorry, we can't go hard on the offense now because we need bullpen help?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly easier to get a bullpen arm than to find that hitter that they're looking for, the impact hitter. And they're going to be bullpen arms. They may have to grab one or two. You look at how valuable Brash was last year because he missed bats. He got strikeouts. They don't have guys besides Munoz and Stanek. They don't have high strikeout guys really. I mean, Thornton's is okay, but he just hasn't been good in those pivot roles. So they need at least one. Santos is supposedly coming back. Logan Evans is a young prospect that throws, triple digits that they're gonna. I think we'll see after the All-Star break. They'll give him a chance. But I think you have to look at an experienced leverage reliever to go to that back of the bullpen because that's how they win games. Even if they go get one more bat and they add a bat, that doesn't fix the offense. They need to get one, but that doesn't fix it. They need Julio to get going and these other guys. So I think they can add both. I think that the reliever is always a little easier to add. And, some people always joke that they could bring Paul Sewald back again because, if the Arizona continue to struggle. But it's the bat that will be harder to find. But it's the bat that everyone wants. But a reliever will be will have a lot of value if they can find the right one.
The Mariners, any chance of getting one of these rental players, like one of these guys, like Alonso, that you kind of have that feeling there's no chance they're going to turn around and sign him as a free agent this winter? But is that out of the realm? Are we looking more of a situation where they pick up, someone who obviously not the same name or two bats that more controllable? Is that what you're sort of predicting here?
Sorry,
if they do go after, no.
Yeah. So I got a golden retriever plowing into the table.
Oh, no worries.
Thinking she needs to be petted.
All good.
No, like I don't think that they can be picky. You know what I mean? Like they're in a need for an impact hitter, another bat. And I don't think that they can sit there and say, well, we don't want a rental or we don't want this, we don't want that. They have to look and see, and they're going to have to, and it's a seller's market. You know, there are not that many teams selling, so the asks are going to be high. So they're going to have to figure out how much they can get, how much they're willing to give up. But yeah, the thing with Alonso now is that the Mets have played so well lately. They played themselves back into the wild card race.
Yes.
And I think the biggest problem we're going to see in terms of adding the impact bat is lots of teams will want one. There might not be that many available because not that many teams are selling. You know,
Right.
You look at the National League. The Nationals are within the striking distance of the wild card. I think really, if you look at it, only the Rockies and the Marlins are the only two teams that have really been eliminated. And we both know that the Rockies don't like to trade their players for whatever reason. So, you know, teams like San Francisco are still hanging around and they're still trying to give their fans a reason. And I think that's what Rob Manfred wanted when he added this other wild card. But it makes the trade deadline a little less active because of it.
You feel like teams too now that it's not so much cut and dry where it's like that one player for, 4 prospects. Like teams are starting to get a little bit more savvy in regards to like a need for a need, or they call them like more baseball moves in regards to like getting a little bit smarter. And I know there's so many teams in the wild card, but I feel like the Mariners last year, like they got a Rojas for a Seawald, and everyone's like, well, that's kind of like a lateral move. Like you sold and you bought at the same time. Do you think there's more teams now willing to do that as opposed to the traditional? All right, we're just giving it up for that one player, because the way the game's gone, and because teams now value more 2, 3, 4 years as opposed to just going all in on 1 year?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have GMs that don't want to lose the trade. There are some that always want to win, but you have GMs that don't want to lose it. You don't want to be known as the guy that gave up Adam Jones and 4 other guys for Eric Bedard and all these things. And because prospects are so much more well known, people are aware of who they are because of social media. So then the backlash can be even greater. You're right. I mean, the purpose of a trade ostensibly is for both teams to address needs, because the needs aren't the same. But,
right.
You do get some GMs that want to win trades. They ask for the sweetener. Jack Sorensic was always that guy. He wanted to win it, after making a few deals, and that's why a lot of them fell through. So I don't think Jerry Dipoto is always worried about that. He's traded away plenty of good prospects thinking that he was making the big league team better. And I think they realize they need to. I think they realize that they've never been in this position this in June with this sort of lead in the division. And I mean, not since I've covered. That's 2006. So I think that's going to motivate them to make some deals. But whether or not they're going to have the matches out there is going to be the bigger question. Yeah,
you're right, man. I mean, since I've covered the team from a non-baseball position, they really, they it's amazing, man. Like they get to that deadline and they're like 6, 7 games up in the division. It's kind of like you really don't have a choice, right? Like, I mean, a couple of years ago, they went and got Luis Castillo. I was kind of surprised, not because they went after pitching. Everyone talked about offense. I was just surprised they were willing to make that move. And I think this year it's even more so, because now all of a sudden they've got such a big lead. But hey, listen, speaking of pitching and the All-Star game coming around, who are the Mariners? Obviously, Logan Gilbert, man, I think I'm not saying he's a shoo-in. I'd be extremely disappointed, if he didn't make it for a couple different reasons. I mean, he's such a good dude, but who else are you looking at on this team's got a chance of making the All-Star team?
Well, I got to get one, so I think Logan is as good as anybody.
Right.
If you look at Andres Munoz, his numbers are pretty good. I think he has a chance to make it. Maybe one of the other starters. George's numbers are starting to pick up. The last 5 outings, he's allowed 2 runs or fewer, so he's a guy that could go. He's kind of a known quantity too. Sometimes with pitching, it's not just about your numbers, but your reputation. So he's, people recognize Logan and George as being good anyways. You could make an argument for Cal. He's going to have 50 He's going to have over 50 RBIs by the break. He's at 49 right now, and he's at 14 home runs.
Right.
He could add 3 or 4. I mean, like you're talking about, guy with be on pace for. He's on pace for 28. Well, he's on pace for 28 homers and 100 RBIs right now as we speak, and it's pretty good. Catchers just don't do that. I know that people look at the batting average, but also like if you look at his defensive numbers, he's rated as like one of the top 2 defensive catchers, and I think managers that play against him respect him. They really see. Well, maybe not John Schneider, but like the rest of them really respect what he does in a game. I mean, like you won't find many managers that wouldn't take a Cal Raleigh on their team automatically. So I think those are the 3.
I think the Schneider thing kind of helps, maybe not because everyone's like, but it just brings more awareness to how does he handle these kind of situations, like But hey, explain to people who don't understand, like so. Explain the voting, how it works. So fans obviously vote players in. What's the next tier after that?
So the fans vote the starters in, and then after that they do a player vote, player and coaches vote, and then I don't believe you can vote for your own players in that process, and they use that to help tally up the reserves. And then you have the minimum requirement of guys plus guys that are going to pitch and that stuff, and then the manager does get a couple choices towards the very end. But I mean, I think the Mariners will probably get they're going to get 1, but they'll probably get 2. I think the Munoz and Gilbert are kind of locks, and then you go from there. But yeah, I don't see like obviously like Julio and those guys aren't getting in. I mean, of the position players, Cal is probably the most viable. I mean, Rojas has had a nice little season, but you look at some of the other third basemen, he's not beating them out.
It's funny, man. Like I used to get that, hey, like the players vote thing inside the clubhouse. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know I'd look at the names, like, I don't know what they're doing because I just I didn't pay attention enough. And I'm like, I know the name, check. You know what I mean? Like this is back when it was paper. Now it's probably just some app or something they hand around the clubhouse. But because sometimes I was guilty of just mailing it in. Like like they had that on the Athletic. They had the player poll recently. Did you catch any of that?
I looked at some of it, yeah. I mean, it's always interesting. I think some of because of how they do it and some of the questions asked, I think some of the players take it more seriously than maybe like the voting. But yeah, right. It's like the Gold Glove voting. They ask some of these coaches and some of the players, they don't know. They're asking the clubbies and stuff like that.
Exactly.
They're asking us. I mean, they ask me. So
yeah, well, it's a big deal. Like it's a huge deal. Like it's a massive award. Like you mentioned that one, that's huge. And like players are just like, oh yeah, I guess he's good. I saw him make a dive and play once. You know what I mean? Like on quick pitch or something. The other day. But no, it's interesting the way it works. Hey, speaking of that, when you vote, like how deep do you go in when you're talking about like Hall of Fame votes and stuff like that? Like what's the process there?
It's gotten easier because like I've done it for a while now, but I like with Hall of Fame I kind of go and look at the new candidates, and you kind of know. I mean, but Fangraphs does a really good job of writing about them. Jay Jaffe writes about him. He does a really good job. I look at his. I mean, I'll call Larry Stone up and ask him some questions too, and things like that. I mean, sometimes you just kind of know that they are without even having to look at the numbers. It's like Beltre, you knew he was going to be one. Like with the MVP and the MVP, or if I do the Cy Young, I look at all the factors. Some people would just say, "Oh, look at this number." I look at both the Fangraphs and Baseball Reference WAR. I look at all the overall numbers, look at the impact on the team, try and go back from what I remember, and then I probably still don't like it, but I try and be pretty fair. I'm not somebody who subscribes they got to be on a winning team to be considered, but it does factor in that there may be some intangibles there that you look to when you're voting for that.
So what about like with Felix with winning the Cy Young 2010? Terrible team, really bad team, right? Numbers were awesome, and this is still back in the time when like wins and losses were still kind of a big deal. You know what I mean? Like by the way, I think he had 13 wins that year. Mm-hmm. Was it 13? Which was insane for how bad the team was and the run support he had. But like even stuff like that, like when you're doing that process, you must have to put some time and effort into that, right? Because it's a big deal. Who's going to win that award?
Yeah, it does take time. I used to write a lot of stuff out on a yellow notepad. I mean, with Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, and you can kind of just, you can create your own searches and have all the different pictures and stuff lined up. It makes it a lot easier too. I mean, like you can kind of go through and narrow it down, and like I said, I'm not afraid to call up some other writers and what do you see from this guy or whatever. I mean, I felt like Felix should have won it the year Kluber won it. Because again, like he got hurt by a couple of bad starts, and I think Kluber, they were kind of pulling him early in some starts too. So I felt like Felix was working with less when that year, and he should have won it. But yeah, it's difficult, and like you kind of, I'm sure in some way we're biased to what we see every day, because like he watched Felix every fifth day for a long time. I mean, for a lot of years, he was the only reason you went to the park because everything else was terrible. So, I mean, like, that's I mean, he pitched on some bad teams. You wonder.
For sure.
I mean, like, they have that stat with how many starts do you have where he went 7 innings, allowed 2 runs or fewer, and took no decisions or losses in those games?
Yeah,
that's absurd.
That. Wild. All right, man. But listen, before I let you go, and I appreciate you joining me on and off there, but before I let you go, what's one big prediction? What offensive player in this lineup is just going to have a huge second half?
Well, I would probably go with the most talented, and I mean, like where he's at to what he's capable of doing. I would say Julio.
Okay.
I mean, like I think he's capable of it. I think the biggest, like the most immediate improvement that we'll see from any one hitter though in the coming weeks will be J.P. Crawford. He's had some longer at bats. I mean, the strikeouts are weird. He struck out a little bit more than I expected, but like we're starting to see it. He hit some balls hard. He hasn't had a lot of luck this year. I mean, I think he should have 3 or 4 more home runs than he does, but they're all missed by about 6 inches apiece. So he's the guy that I expect immediate improvement from. But I think if you're looking at like somebody who could make a dramatic jump, I mean, look at last year. Julio put together a month that equals some guys' careers. So that's where I think he's going to be.
I love it. Well, Ryan, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, especially on an off day. But listen, if you're not following Ryan Divish already, I'm sure you are. By the way, he's very interactive. He'll get right back to you on Twitter at Ryan Divish over at Twitter. And this is brought to you by San Juan Seltzer. Ryan, I appreciate it, man. I'll see you down at the ballpark.
Take it easy.